Hey everyone, in today's video, I want to share with you how I photograph a wedding using only prime lenses. So if you're wondering why my setup looks a little bit different and I'm not in my usual office, it's because Dan and I are in Tasmania at the moment and we are doing photo and video for a wedding tomorrow. So as I was packing my camera bag to get ready for tomorrow's wedding, I thought right now would be the perfect opportunity to film this video for you guys. So I photograph on a wide variety of prime lenses, and if you're wondering why don't I just shoot on a zoom lens rather than a whole bunch of prime lenses, and there's a few reasons for that. So first of all, I love the low light capabilities of prime lenses. With something like a 24-70, you've got an aperture of 2.8, and the majority of a wedding is usually indoors. You're getting ready indoors, the ceremony is usually indoors, and the reception is usually indoors, which means that I want to be using lenses that have a wide aperture such as 1.2 or 1.4 to be able to let in as much light as possible and have really high quality images without that high ISO grain and things like that. Another reason is that prime lenses just generally have better quality in their photos. For example, a 24-70 on the 24mm side is not going to look the same as a prime 24 lens, and the same goes if you put the 24-70 on the 70mm side. It's not quite the same as an 85mm lens. The prime lenses really do have a really beautiful quality about them. The bokeh is beautiful, the sharpness is really crisp, and I just personally love using prime lenses. One last reason why I really love using prime lenses, which I touched on in another video that I filmed, is that prime lenses help me stay creative throughout the day. If I was using a 24-70, I probably wouldn't be moving around physically as much throughout the day because I would be relying on the zoom of the lens to be able to compose my photos. Whereas with prime lenses, I physically move around throughout the day, and this helps me not miss moments that are happening because I'm constantly walking around, moving around, composing my photos, keeping an eye out on what's happening. And yeah, it just really helps me stay creative throughout the day. Another reason why I like shooting with primes compared to zoom lenses is that it's also an insurance policy to have a wide range of prime lenses. For example, if I arrive at a wedding with just a 24-70 and a 70-200 to capture the entire day and one or both lenses stop working, then I have no backup options to continue shooting if that happens. Compared to if my 35mm, for example, stops working throughout the day, I still have a 24mm or a 50mm that I can use to replace that lens as a backup if that happens. The same as if a 50mm stops working, then I have the 35 and the 85 that I can use instead, and so on. When I'm showing you my kit, you might think that it's super heavy, but if I were to be only shooting on zoom lenses, I realistically would need a backup lens for each of the zoom lenses that I had. For example, I would have two 24-70s and maybe one 70-200 and an 85 to replace the 70-200 if something happened to it. So either way, with primes or zoom lenses, both the camera kits are going to be heavy. Okay, so now moving on to the part where we actually have to capture the wedding. So the way that I do this is by using two camera bodies, and I have these straps that go on my shoulders and they attach one camera to each side. So I use two camera bodies throughout the entire day. A little story behind these guys here. I actually used to use a double camera strap thing that I got from eBay for like $15. It was terrible, and every time the day after a wedding, my back would hurt so much and I would feel miserable all day because they weren't good for me. And then one day, Dan came along this company called Holdfast Straps and got me this as a present, and my life has literally changed. So if you shoot with two camera bodies regularly, I really recommend that you guys check this out. And this isn't sponsored or anything, I just genuinely love their products and my back doesn't hurt after a wedding anymore, thanks to this. With the two camera bodies, I am currently using the Canon 5D Mark IIIs, and I have two camera bodies that are on me pretty much the entire day. And then I also have a third Canon 5D Mark III that is a spare in case something happens to one or both my camera bodies. And that's just an insurance policy, just in case something happens. I highly doubt something will happen to both the cameras at the same time, but you never know. So it's important to play it safe rather than having to shoot the wedding on your phone or borrow a guest camera or something. I don't know what you would do if all your cameras break, but yeah, so I've got three bodies that I take with me. Moving on to the lenses that I use the Sigma 24mm 1.4, the Canon 35mm 1.4, the Canon 50mm 1.2, Canon 85mm 1.2, and Canon 135mm f2 lens. So those are all the lenses that I bring with me to a wedding. And I'm gonna go through and describe to you what combination of lenses I use throughout the day and why. So to start off with, usually you photograph the bride and groom getting ready at different locations. So for that, I normally like to have my 24mm and my 35 on each camera. I normally like to have these two lenses as when you're getting ready, it's usually at a house or in a hotel room, so there isn't much space to work with. That's why I choose having two wide lenses with me. If for some reason the place that they're getting ready is actually really large, sometimes you get really large hotel rooms and sometimes they're getting ready in like a really large cottage, then I would have my 35mm and my 50mm instead. So I have something wide and then I also have something that's slightly more zoomed in to be able to get closer up shots. So after the getting ready usually comes the ceremony, and for the ceremony I like to use my 85mm and my 50mm together. If the ceremony area is really, really large and the couple are far away, I will switch the 50mm to a 135mm instead. The reason why I like to use both these lenses is because of their reach. So I move around quite a lot during the ceremony and I try not to get in front of anyone because you don't want to be sitting there watching your friend get married and have a photographer just stand right in front of you while that's happening. So I like to be able to walk around and sneakily be able to capture photos of the couple getting married without getting in too many people's way. And an 85, a 50mm, and a 135 is a really great way to do that, as I can sort of stand a little bit further back and still be able to get those close-up photos. Ceremonies usually happen either outdoors or in a church, and in a church the lighting is usually pretty dim, so I like to use the 85 because the aperture is super wide at 1.2 and lets a lot of light into the photo, causing it to not be too grainy. Use the 85 the majority of the time throughout the ceremony, and then I use the 50mm or the 135 to get those extra shots to put in between. Right after the ceremony, usually the family and friends come and gather around the couple and everyone's congratulating everyone, they have a few drinks. So what I like to do is I swap out my 85mm for a 35mm, and then I have a 35mm and a 50mm together. And this allows me to be able to capture all the moments that are happening in front of me. I can get up close if I need to with the 35, and if something's happening a little bit further away, I use my 50. Because it's usually a lot of people gathering around the bride and groom, I really love using my 35mm for this instance, as it is a super fast lens. It's actually the fastest lens that I have in my kit. So it makes sure that I'm able to capture the moment as it happens and not miss anything because the camera is not able to focus because there's too much movement and there's too many people and distractions in the shot. So I usually stick to my 35 the majority of the time during those post-ceremony celebrations. Right after that, I usually like to get a few family portraits because I prefer getting them when we're outdoors in nice lighting rather than at the reception where the backgrounds usually don't look that good and flash pictures also don't look that good. So I normally do that with my 35mm lens. And if the bride and groom want a group photo of absolutely everyone that's there at the wedding, I'll quickly switch out my 50mm for a 24mm, and then once I get the group shot, I switch it back to my 50. So straight after that, we normally head off to do bridal portraits at a location such as the beach when we're in Australia, or a forest or a garden or something like that. And I've already got the combination of lenses that I like to use for that on my cameras, which is the 35 and the 50. If you've watched any of my fashion photo shoot behind the scene videos, you would know that I absolutely love using my 35mm for portraits. It's a really, really flattering lens. It includes a lot of background in it because of the 35mm compression, and it doesn't have such a shallow depth of field compared to the 50mm or the 85mm. So I use this the majority of the time throughout the portraits. I normally get a lot of close-up photos of the bride and groom with the 35. I also get the group shots with the entire bridal party and then the girls' side of the bridal party and the boys' side of the bridal party. I do all those shots on the 35. Then I have my 50 for those extra shots which I want to make look a little bit more dreamy. So I like to use the 50mm at f1.2 or f2 to be able to get the bride and groom really sharp, and then the background with lots of beautiful bokeh in the background. Depending on the location that we're shooting at, so if we're shooting at a park or somewhere with a lot of trees and greenery, sometimes I'll switch out my 50mm for an 85mm towards the end of the portrait session to get a few extra photos that look even more dreamy than the 50mm with the shallow depth of field. And I do this at the end because the 85mm really shines when you've got golden hour happening. You can get some really beautiful photos with the 85mm, especially if it's sunset, as the 85mm has some really nice lens flare, and I feel like my couples always really love those types of photos. All right, so we are now moving on to the reception part of the night, which is almost the end of the day, but still so many things happen throughout the reception, and I do end up changing out my lenses quite a lot throughout the reception. First thing that I do when I get to the reception is attach a flash to each of my cameras. So I have the Canon Speedlight 580EX Mark II, and I also have the 600EX RT Speedlight II. So first thing that I do is I put the flashes on both my cameras. So when we enter the reception, I still have my 35mm and 50mm on my camera. And what I like to do is go around and take photos of the people that are sitting at their tables already. So I get a few candid shots with my 50mm, as I don't have to get in super close to my subject, which is a bit awkward sometimes, and sometimes they can tell that you're taking a photo of them if you get up really close with the 35. So in order to be able to keep those photos looking candid, I like to use my 50. And then I also like to get some portraits of like the couples at the table or whoever's come to the wedding together. I just get a photo of them with the 35. So the couple has a photo of everyone that was there for them on their day. I also like to capture the bridal party entering the reception, usually on my 50mm first, because I like to stand closer to the table. So at first they're really far away as they're entering, and as they start walking closer and closer to me, I switch over to my 35, which again is really good with movement photos and fast action stuff. It always catches focus and it's super easy to get a sharp photo with it. Next up in the reception is the speeches. So just like the ceremony, I try not to get in the way of people's views too much while I'm shooting. So I have my 50mm and I replace my 35 with the 85mm lens, which again gives me a lot of reach to be able to capture close-up photos of the person that's speaking, and then reaction photos of like the mum and dad in the crowd or people laughing and things like that. Once again, if the reception is really big, I switch my 50mm to a 135mm, and then I use the 135 to capture the person speaking and the 85 to capture a bit of a wider shot where you can see more people. Next up is the cake cutting, which once again, I switch out my 85mm back to my 35mm, and I also have my 50. So I like to capture the cake cutting on both these lenses. Usually I'll use the 35 to capture a portrait of the couple with the cake, and then I'll use the 50mm to get a more creative shot, like a close-up of the knife in the cake or something like that. And then same goes with the first dance. I already have these two lenses on my cameras, so I will usually shoot the majority of the first dance on my 50mm lens. And then last but not least, after the first dance is usually when everyone gets up onto the dance floor. So what I normally like to do is I have my 35 and 50 on my cameras, and I'll take a few photos while everyone's first up on the dance floor. Then I'll usually go back to my camera bag and take off my holdfast straps and only use one camera with the 35mm and my newer flash, the 600EX Speedlight, and use that to capture the rest of all the dancing photos. And there's a few reasons that I do this. The first one is that because my cameras are hanging off my shoulders, like on my side, I don't want people that are going crazy on the dance floor to kind of just be knocking into them all the time. I also like to get right into the dance floor to be able to capture like really fun movement photos. And I also only like to take one camera, as it's less intimidating for the people that are dancing. I feel like they don't hold back as much if you've only got one little camera with the 35mm. It doesn't look as intimidating as I looked the rest of the day with two cameras, my 85mm, which is huge, So yeah, I find I get much more genuine kind of dancing moments like that. So I'm usually pretty exhausted by this time of night, but the day is almost done. The last thing that I like to do before I leave is to get my couple outside in the middle of the night for some nighttime portraits. And this might sound really weird, but I'll show you some example images of what they look like. And for that, I like to use flash triggers to be able to connect my camera to my flash. And what I do is I put my flash on a tripod and get my couple to stand in front of it. And then this creates this really beautiful backlit scene with my couple as silhouettes, and it's just like a few fun extra photos to get at the end of the day. I find that the most amazing ones are when it's raining and your couple's happy to go out in the pouring rain to be able to get those photos. The flash actually lights up all the raindrops in the sky and it just creates such a beautiful photo. Having them outside for night portraits at the end of the day is also a really great way to be able to tell them thank you for having me here on your day and being able to say goodbye to them just before you leave. So that is basically how I photograph a wedding using only prime lenses from the very beginning of the day to the very end of the day. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or anything that you want to know, please let me know in the comments. I really love hearing from you guys. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye.